need to get this win to stay alive. If they do not, Free Pumps moving on to the first ever Mythic Dungeon Invitational Global LAN.
So right away, Sours, we're definitely going to see that Control Undead coming out of those 2 Blood DKs with those Forlorn Spirits coming up. I would expect at least. And then, you know, I've seen a lot of direction for the teams, a lot of the teams over the weeks and even on live servers on what kind of their strategy they implement going up to this balcony, how exactly they will kill the spirits. We'll have to see from both teams if they have to kill most of the trash, none of the trash. But the name of the game for both teams is really we want to start the RP on the Opera event as quickly as possible.
So, yeah, so whether or not teams decide that they want to get some kill count here or do a suicide and mass res, we'll have to see. Gulch Trotters is doing a pretty nice AoE pool over here on the left. It looks like they are committed to killing this trash. Maybe then they've got a lot to clear below. Well, Free Pumps is doing some sort of death run. I don't know if they've quite made it far enough. I don't know if this is where you want to be right now as Free Pumps. That doesn't look intentional, especially with a release like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was a purposeful death run as much, because we did see them immediately res up, so it's not like the healer got too far. We are seeing the death intended this time on Gulch Trotter's side. They do kill 5% of that trash. Dag has indeed started the RP over on the Opera event, reses everyone up, drops that sugar-crusted fish feast immediately. Everyone eats up the disgusting fish feast and gets ready to pull some of the remaining trash while effectively the RP for Opera is still happening. So it's really efficient use of their time right now. They will finish the rest of this trash off and then move over to the Opera event. Now, it is important for those at home to know that Necrotic is a particularly daunting affix for the tank. What it does is it adds us, every successful melee will add a stack to the tank, decreasing the amount of healing they receive by 3% per stack, meaning that at 33% stacks, you're 99% unhealable. So eventually you will have to enter a more defensive state as a tank and start kiting with support of your teammates with either stuns or, of course, dropping that death and decay with that slow.
Of course, another death out of the tank over on Free Pumps. Perhaps this is why Gulch Trotters took them here. They maybe know that they're going to struggle for some reason here, which is weird to see Free Pumps. They looked so convincing in the previous dungeon. You would think that, you know, what could have possibly happened. There is, of course, the death doesn't look that bad, 4 to 6, but of course those 4 deaths by Gulch Trotters were all intentional deaths, and all 6 of those deaths by Free Pumps have been unintentional as they move into this Opera event.
Yeah, I mean, really a bit sloppy coming out of Free Pumps here, which surprises you because, as you mentioned right before this is a map that teams need to practice just in case they do get to that lower bracket round 1. Nonetheless, we will have to keep an eye on Free Pumps, but over on the left side here, all attention on Gulch Trotters as we do enter this not tyrannical, we are in a fortified dungeon, but this non-tyrannical version of Beauty and the Beast that we've seen a few times today already. But for those at home, there are 3 kind of kitchen appliances. Of course, a Kobold is a kitchen appliance that will need to be killed prior to getting access to Coggleston, the stove at the end. The order you kill them in is totally up to you, but you do have to bear in mind that every time you kill one of these appliances, all of them will heal to 100%. You have to restart that.
Yeah, so what's also kind of cool to see is that I believe this is a different kill count coming out of these Asian Pacific teams, or a kill order, I'm sorry, out of these Asian Pacific teams on this first boss compared to the NA teams we saw. We did see Bablet generally going down second. There is a death out of Dag P over on Gulch Trotters. They do have that Heroes available to bring him up. Free Pumps did have another wipe on the way to this first boss. They are having one heck of a time struggling to get over there.
I mean, Pumps is going to be locked away for a long time at this pace. Gulch Trotters. Now, we did have the death over from Dag. He did get caught by Bablet the Broom a couple of times. Severe sweep dusting over on Dag. Now, already chunked him for about 84% of the HP and then finished him off with 1 extra one. But we're about to have access to Coggleston. Now, Coggleston is a bit of a pain in the butt, so to speak, with this Necrotic affix because he does summon forks. And those forks need to be killed quickly because you're having triple the amount of mobs applying necrotic stacks to the tank. So you want to make sure you AoE those quickly. When combined as well with the fact that he does a cast on the tank that increases the amount of damage you take, it could be quite daunting.
Yeah, so this Coggleston is really scary. You know, these forks, of course, are also going to allow some of these people to do more damage. We do see that Boom can shoot up again, as he has done so many times in the previous dungeons whenever these trashes have additional mobs for him to deal with. Of course, this time, this damage is much more useful than previously because, like you said, the necrotic stacks that are applied from these boss mobs, these summoned boss mobs, are really scary. The DK might have to eventually start running away and kiting, but the boss does fall, so he's okay.
They put a fork in it indeed and start heading over to the backstage VIP area. Now, usually we see a huge pull here with the entire backstage and under the stage as well, as we do see the DK start to do this. Now, Blood DKs do have a couple of tips and tricks that they could do to kind of deal with these necrotic stacks. One of them is wearing their legendary cloak, doubling the duration of their anti-magic shell. As we see anti-magic shell popped up here, whether or not he's wearing it, we would have to double check. Something he can certainly equip and unequip on a per pack basis, but also something to note, and you mentioned in the last dungeon, Dancing Rune Weapon is an incredibly useful tool for for these mass pulls in this dungeon, as it'll increase your parry chance by 30%. And what we mentioned earlier is that only successful melees apply necrotic to the tank. So mitigating and avoiding a lot of those melees in the first place will certainly kind of mitigate the amount of stacks going into the tank, making them easier to heal. Excellent pull there by Gulch Trotters.
This was a 24, and they did that pull extremely cleanly.
A 24 fortified.
24 fortified, exactly, right? And with the necrotic going on, while they're, of course, dodging these volcanoes, they are going to be pulling some ushers here. We did see a lot of struggle with these ushers earlier. Now, if these ushers get their cast off all together, like all 4 of them, there is the potential that these flashlights could kill you, even with your back turned. We do see one death grip going out to interrupt one of the flashlights to delay them. If they had gone off altogether, you know, especially if you're looking at them, you're gone.
Yeah, so really well done there to make sure that they stagger the flashlight cast. Big hit coming in here on the group again, making sure to stagger one more time. Eventually, they will likely pull the entire front stage area. I would take a gander at. Most teams usually do. But they're likely slowly pulling some of these ushers for the first 2 pairs to get some of their CDs ready. And now we're seeing one more time this mass pull coming in from Skylark, making sure as well he's going to have to use that AMS soon, getting that stun out as soon as possible. Ushers, unfortunately, cannot be hard CC'd, so some of those necrotic stacks will leak by default.
Yeah, so there are a lot of tools they have available. We do see a nice Typhoon knockback coming out of these guys to keep these mobs away from them. Doing a really good job. You see this Boomkin is doing a ton of AoE damage on this pack. Normally, you see the Windwalkers, Free Pumps has got another death on this boss. They're really having a hard time, you know, getting their feet on the ground at the start of this dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, they're really behind. They're at 60% now on Cogleston. We'll keep an eye on them, but a lot of the really scary pulls coming up for Free Pumps. Gulch Trotter has just gone through just no problem. They're looking excellent right now, so we'll see if Free Pumps can follow suit and 43% more on Cogleston. As the tank dip's quite low there, having some trouble catching up on the necrotic. We do see these couple of those forks still living on Cogleston's side. Hopefully they're able to stabilize in just a moment. Only 2% on trash, whilst Gulch Trotter is already moving in this center foyer area. Deciding now, are we going to go over to Maiden, which it looks like is exactly what they're going to do. Usually a big pull coming up here as we see that Sky Step potion get popped right away, pulling all of this trash into Maiden's room and around the corner for that line of sight.
It's interesting to see them actually choose here to go to Maiden second, because with that remaining cooldown on that Bloodlust means that if they had decided to instead go to Moroes, they would have very likely had it available for killing it. But perhaps they've decided that Maiden is a scarier boss, and maybe they might be, because they could even be heading to Moroes last. There is some deaths coming out. They
on the snake.
On the snake, right? You've got to watch out for those volcanoes. You know, you play with fire, you're going to get burned, right? They're doing a pretty good job. There are a couple of scary take mechanics also that players need to be aware of on this trash. You want to talk about that?
So technically, yeah, I mean, the trash in general just it does a ton of damage. There's a few debuffs that play together and can immediately one-shot you. One of the most dangerous, though, is that shield slam, which on live I love to point into the DPS and get them stunned. But it does do a frontal shockwave stun for 4 seconds. So, of course, anybody getting caught in that, especially the tank, is pretty much dead on the spot with the amount of trash that they pulled. Unfortunately, the monk does get caught there, gets clipped. They don't have the battle res available, but they managed to clean up the trash and get the res up right away. Now, Maiden, a boss we've seen a few times today, Sours. Important mechanics, of course. The major mechanic that we really need to focus on is that combination of Consecration dot leading into her Mass Repentance.
Yeah, so there is, you know, the dot as well as the repentance, as well as several of the other casts that Maidens are going to do need to be kicked whenever possible. Kicking, of course, as a Demon Hunter is going to give you additional resource to do more damage. And if for any player wearing Sevus, of course, that is a nice little pocket less to have available. Doing a really good job not letting any of these casts go off on Maiden on 60%. Free Pumps is just cleaning up the trash below the stage. They have another death out on their team. They're really, it's good to see that they're still at it, right? When you're down like this on a map that you didn't pick and things aren't quite going your way, it's good to see the team, keep on trying at it. But Maiden is going down really smoothly for Gulch Trotters. That first repentance going out, they're doing a nice job keeping everyone stable and at full health. Once they burn through the shield, of course, is a big kick that need to take care of. Otherwise, they're all going to die. Yeah,
and teams do well usually to try and delay the kick on that Holy Wrath for as long as possible, because the boss really isn't doing any mechanic in the meantime. You're delaying a lot of the timers to the next shield, and actually Gulch Trotters are in a really prime position right now to skip the second shield entirely. They got to 46% for the first shield, waited for that late kick. Technique's dipping a bit low, having an extra Consecrate debuff. I'm not really sure why. Might have gone out just a bit too far, but they do manage to heal him up. Another death coming over on free pump side as they've already moved upstairs past Opera. Now, if I'm not mistaken, they actually skipped some of the VIP trash in the back because they had 5% going down under the stage, so I'm not really sure how they managed past that trash. Nonetheless, that will be some percent they need to make up later. And as you're rightfully pointing out, another death going out on free pumps right now. I mean, things are just not looking great for them at the moment.
This is exactly what happened to free pumps, unfortunately, in that Pulse of Valor earlier, where they do a pretty okay job on trash. Of course, they did have one death on that Opera event, or on the bosses, but on trash, you know, for some reason, they're really struggling to handle the trash. You know, these flashlights going off are very scary. These volcanoes you have to watch out for. Of course, all the damage is completely avoidable. Maiden going down really cleanly by Gulch Trotters. You know, not a death in sight, and now they can head over. They've got just 2 bosses left, and free pumps is really you know, in their dust at this point.
And I mean, not just that, but they also one-phased the boss. They only had to deal with that one shield, which is a huge time save, something that a lot of teams look forward to on things like Hellia, etc. Just skipping that one entirety of a transition phase is huge. As we see Skylar jump down, immediately pop that Sky Step pre-AMS to make sure none of those necrotic stacks are applying as he runs around the room, picks up the 3 wardens along with all of the guests, and everyone's going to start DPSing these down as quick as possible, especially the guests, to really mitigate the kind of incoming necrotic stacks.
Yeah, so this room is really scary. There's a lot of dangerous abilities coming out, especially by these blueberries, as they're so aptly named. And of course, these skeletal waiters also have a very scary debuff that they'll be putting out on the tank that you have to be aware of. They're doing a really good job making sure to stay spread and avoid the swirlies on the ground that will, of course, kill them instantly. And, you know, by staying spread, they're not going to be putting these circles on their friends, which could also do a ton of damage to their friends.
Yeah, those usually do a bit lighter damage, but certainly the swirlies are quite lethal. We do see that the Purgatory has procced over for Skylar. They run over immediately to the traps on the side of the room, getting ready to CC 2 of the dinner guests at Moroes' dinner party, which they're so rudely crashing right now. Usually we see Druger and Darius being CC'd, but in this case it was actually Darius and I believe, was it Crispin or Millstripe that they did?
I believe it was Crispin.
It was Crispin,
They've got Millstripe here in the fight. And now, something, of course, why we see teams CC these mobs is for each additional mob that is engaged with the boss, they will all do more damage and attack faster. And for some of those abilities, that is the exact opposite of what you want. That could very well spell disaster. They're doing a nice job throwing these Ghostbuster traps at these mobs and just making sure to kill. They've decided to kill Baron before Moroes. You see, they're just cleaving off of the trash onto Moroes. Now that since Baron has died, they have moved on to the Baroness, and you know, they're doing a really clean job so far.
Yeah, and I'm glad they know who they're going to call. Now, this is a particularly dangerous boss here. I mean, in general, of course, 24, etc., but once again, with that necrotic affix, because you do have those dinner guests applying extra necrotic stacks to the tank, Chompy getting that first growth stack, as we've already kind of cycled through the immunity from Dag, which the healer is always the first person to get that garrote. But we don't have Purgatory available for the DK, but again, fortunately, we do have a guaranteed reset on a 1-minute timer for the Blood DK if they are wearing that cloak, or if they can kite far enough and then pop their regular AMS with 5 seconds or less remaining on the necrotic. So everything's looking great and stable for them as we speak.
Yeah, so really excellently done from them. And what was actually very cool that Gulch Trotters did that we didn't see in some of the earlier dungeons is when Moroes was at 75% health, they actually ripped down the 3rd ad so that they could take care of it before bringing Moroes down to 50%. Of course, at 50% health, Moroes will break all of those ghost traps out. You know, it's going to get quite spooky in there. And now that Crispin is here with none of his other friends, his cast is quite slow and it's very easy to move out of. Now, if a player does find themselves caught in that sparkle on the ground, they will be saying goodbye.
Yeah, and I'm liking the strategy here. I commented on this the first time they did it. They're kind of pulling Moroes back and forth across the room and guaranteeing that they bait the frontal from Crispin on the Boomkin, who's kind of lagging just barely behind Crispin, making sure that the rest of the players don't have to worry about it. And as soon as that cast starts from Crispin Ference, the Moonkin just moves up, no problem, and gets ready for the next one. Really well done here by them as he punts it away and keeps it away from the group. Moroes now at 14%. They're really not interested in killing Crispin at this point. There's no point. He will despawn the moment Moroes dies anyways.
Yeah, they're showing a real mastery of this mechanic. Why kill Lord Crispin when you could just simply kill Moroes and deal with Crispin's mechanic by using good positioning? You know, that 46% health remaining on him, that would have been wasted damage had they opted to kill him instead. Free Pumps they are looking just just over halfway through on Maiden. Gulch Trotters is heading now down towards the Attumen room. There's a little bit of trash here. Now they've only pulled some not very scary mobs. The mobs actually in the center of this courtyard room have a very, very hard-hitting Shadow Bolt volley, and they've done a good job to not accidentally face pull any of those.
Oh yeah, I mean on a 24 fortify, that's an immediate one-shot on the grip, certainly, and it has a huge amount of health, and some of the mobs it comes with end up healing as well, and it's just an absolute nightmare. Nothing you want to be dealing with. Free Pumps here has gotten through their first shield phase on Maiden, but it was well above the 50% mark, which leads me to believe that they will unfortunately have to deal with the second one. Seeing what was likely going to be a massive pull coming in here from Gulch Trotters, goes and tags Midnight right away. Midnight runs out and despawns, of course. The rest of the mobs are brought in, AoE gripped, immediately silenced with the beam because there's a lot of splash damage that goes out from these mobs, and everyone's going to pump as much damage as possible into them because right now it's definitely kill or be killed, especially we see that AMS come up, a lot of necrotic stacks going out, and just lots of residual damage going out as we see a lot of the pulsing. Techniques get down to 1%. Chompy does go down. They do have the battle res available, but Skylar is just so far out of position right now, kiting these mobs around, that he's just not in range to get Chompy as he curls back around and grabs him.
You know, these fire circles are really, really scary, and especially if you were to cleave them onto a friend. They are going to be applying a dot to, they are going to be doing a dot ticking damage onto their target before exploding. So it's important to keep them topped off so that the explosion doesn't kill them. Just one more boss left as we get into this full screen, and that Lust is available. So we're very likely to see Attumen's going to jump off the horse, and they will be aiming for that one shot. And now another mechanic that this boss has is he's going to put out this spectral ghost on the back of one of the players. It's important. We haven't talked about this very much in the tournament, but communication is very important in these dungeons, and communication is especially important here against Attumen, so that you can call out to your healer who has the debuff so that they can dispel you and get the dot off of the rest of the party.
Right, you are. Midnight now about to hit that 50% mark, and we're going to see Attumen get off his high horse in just a moment. We're entering now the second phase here, where the teams will bloodlust and immediately get all of their damage and CDs out as quick as possible to make sure that Attumen does not remount Midnight, which occurs at midnight, healing up to 100%. Once they reach, I believe, the 20% threshold, something like that, Attumen will not remount regardless of Midnight healing up to 100%, so they're getting as much damage in as possible, avoiding that frontal on the Mortal Strike, which does decrease your maximum HP by 50% for 10 seconds. But the big one to really focus on is the shared suffering, which unfortunately hits as Midnight charges through and finishes off techniques. Does not have a battle res available to them, but they're well beyond the threshold for Attumen and should be having easy access to Midnight, getting that 100% damage taken and damage done buff, so they should be able to close this out easily.
Now they just have to kill Midnight left, and now Midnight, once Attumen's dead, he will just stomp, and each time he stomps, the next mighty stomp that he casts will do more damage. If this was a tyrannical setting, it could get very scary, but of course it is just that fortified, so they're doing nice. We see just how far behind Free Pumps is. They haven't even cleared the trash to be able to engage with Moroes. They've got 19 deaths. Really good showing from Gulch Trotters here.
I mean, not to beat a dead horse right now, but Free Pumps really just having not the best dungeon, 19 wipes. It's almost like, I mean, Rob, we talked about this earlier, but, they came out of that DHT looking so solid, and it's kind of, they just reverted to some of the sloppiness that we saw in the Free Marcy series earlier.
For sure, and obviously when you look at how do you win a series in the MDI, right? For Asia Pacific, things are going to start off on a romantic little boat ride, but I promise they're going to go 0 to 100 real quick.
Rob, one day I fantasize about us taking a similar gondola ride through the Court of Stars, little ravine area. Sours, I would love to have one with you as well, but Rob and I have just been planning this for so long. But we do have a nice bit of time to kind of talk about this dungeon, break down some of these early pulls, because we will just see players taking this ride through. What I do expect, of course, to see out of both teams right off the bat is skipping that very first guard. There's just no point bringing them along. Huge amounts of health, so we'll likely see that in prison coming out of Gulch Trotters, and likely a repentance from Free Pumps subs.
And of course, there are lots of ways that you can CC mobs to skip them. If you are a hunter and you can throw a freezing trap at a mob, of course, freezing trap will not prevent combat from face pulling, so you can run into the mob and then let your team through. As long as nobody casts abilities, you can feign death afterwards and drop combat. The same thing will apply to other abilities like Paralyze. You'll have to just play around with CCs and see what works out. But skipping that mob, of course, is very important. Otherwise, he's going to spam some slams on the ground and very slowly chase after you for the the rest of the dungeon, and you really just don't want to come up from behind you.
And they just have so much health compared to some of the other standard mobs in this dungeon. Now, of course, we are in the teaming kind of affix here, so we will have some extra trash that the players will need to chew through. Not only are there more mobs present in the dungeon in the teaming affix, but you do also need to kill a higher amount of trash in order to succeed. Of course, we have the kind of wet noodle affix, as Rob so aptly called it, with volcanic. Players just got to watch their feet, making sure that they're not getting hit by any of that. We see that immediate Agrimar's trinket come up on the pull from Skylar there. It's about a 20 to 25 million absorb, depending on the eye level of it. A huge absorb, just because those scouts throwing out the torches right away just do such an immense amount of damage that it's actually quite easy for tanks to get one shot if they don't have any form of substantial mitigation up on pull.
Yeah, it's also very important that as a DPS, you don't want to be the one who engages those first, otherwise they will throw that torch at you. And you see just how much damage it does there to Skylar, bringing him down like to 30% health from that torch. If you're a DPS player and that torch hits you, you are gone. It's going to be lights out for you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Free Pumps moving just a bit earlier. We see a similar pull from both teams here as they kind of weave through the middle of the court, leading up to the bridge to the patrol captain. Free Pumps doing it just a bit faster, getting everything down as quickly as possible. And I believe they actually pulled the construct pack as well in front of the patrol captain, which they did, so they have free access to that, getting ready and moving over to turn off some of these towers as to have less of the ads spawn during the boss encounter hours.
Yeah, so these ads are going to come out and be quite a hindrance on the team. They will, of course, cast Hinder on the players, and you know that will be
aptly named.
Yeah, so you definitely don't want that going on you. And you know the boss is going to be putting out a street sweep laser that we see going here for Free Pumps, as well as a bow tie. And if you stand in either of these mechanics, you will be gone. You have to be careful of the street sweeper. Of course, the visual, you know, you need to watch out for it. And then also the other ability that he puts out is this jump ability. And if you're a class like a Paladin, or maybe you're a Windwalker with your Tiger's Lust, or any other class with some sort of freedom, instead of jumping, you can simply freedom yourself to remove that dot from you.
Right, sure. And of course, you can dispel it as well. It is a magic effect, so oftentimes you will see the healer dispelling one of the range so that they don't have to jump around aimlessly and lose a bunch of damage. The melee can jump and not lose any substantial amount of damage, along with the tank as well. But if you do have those tools available, why not use them to your advantage? Patrol Captain down to 62% already in favor of Free Pumps. Similar trash percentage for both teams, and as I say that, actually Gulch Trotter skyrocketing up to 40%, killing that last contract on top of the boss, but still faring a fair bit behind Free Pumps in terms of boss damage. We do know, of course, the Flask of Eternal Night is accessible to both of these teams. Do not need that alchemy, and it does not need to be a rogue in this case, meaning that the boss at 25% will RP and die.
That is, of course, something different about Court of Stars here on the tournament realm compared to on live servers, where the only clickable in the entire dungeon is going to be that Poison Flask. And so what Free Pumps has done now is they've actually pulled, there's a trash pack to the left of the staircase as you exit the room with a lot of mana worms as well as a caster, and they have brought that into the boss fight with them, so to gain a little bit of health, a little bit of kill percent while cleaving off of the boss. You know, everything from this guy is fairly long cast time and really well telegraphed, so teams don't have to worry about that many things. All they've got to do is get him to that 20%, and then we'll see if these teams go their separate ways to start the RP as well as clear up some trash around the docks.
So we do see Patrol Captain getting down to 24% here, going and taking a fatal swig of that flask. Now, likely we're going to see a backdoor strategy here coming out of Free Pumps, which is pretty typical for teams these days. We're going to have likely Sups, Lift the healer, running all the way around, starting the RP as the remaining 4 members of the team curl around to the back door. That will open only once that RP is started. Here we see Sups, already with that Sky Step potion going out. The rest of the team, now we see teams do one of two things here. They either just kind of wait, or they actually go and try to 4-man the Harbor without the healer. A bit scary in a 24 setting, perhaps not something we'll see out of them, but Sups does start the event, immediately dies because when he res, there's the checkpoint right there. The rest of the team's waiting, and did indeed pull a bit of trash in the meantime.
There was a death in the meantime, of course, coming out of Gulch Trotters on that Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter is a class that is very exciting here in Court of Stars, where they are able to use their ability to see where the mob is hidden in that Guess Who game. And what's cool about that is if Gulch Trotters decides not to get 100% kill count, they can actually send that Demon Hunter off to solo. Of course, Arfuzu dies from free pumps, then followed quickly by Sups as well as Vanch. You know, this is not what you want to see, of course. This is that teaming setting, so there's a lot of mobs here that are very dangerous.
I mean, those Inquisitors are just an absolute nightmare to deal with, getting a lot of those eye casts out. There's the imps in there as well. If those imps mass cast on anybody, the Fireball or any of the Dread Inferno, it's going to be absolutely lethal. A couple more deaths coming in on the board from the imps there. Really just a mass amount of damage. 7 deaths on the board now. Subs tipping really low. LC base barely holding on. Arsfu barely holding on. A lot of healing needed to come out. They're starting to stabilize a bit, but we still have Inquisitors at 30% health. Mistresses spike damaging with 25% MS debuff on the tank. Managed to finally stabilize. There is the huge hit that I was talking about on the tank. Down to 1% right now. Barely holding on for dear life, but does ultimately go down as the rest of the trash goes down. Fortunately, the checkpoint is really close, which is what allowed them to kind of corpse run and finish off the rest of the pack, but really not a very clean performance there.
Yeah, you really never want to have to corpse run a pool like that. Once your cooldowns are popped, they're not going to come back once you're popped right onto that ground. So by dying once that pool starts, it goes that much slower, and then each death is going to cost you. Now they've got 6 additional deaths on the board compared to Gulch Trotters, so they're 30 seconds behind. Gulch Trotters has engaged the first mini boss. Imakacha is out.
Please don't. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the name of the boss. Yes, of course.
So yeah, Imakacha is going to come out, and she's got a little cleave ability around her. You want to make sure that you stand out of range of the circle. It's quite small, so you can still often melee her without being hit by it. She's not going to be very dangerous, but Skylark is, of course, bringing the mob over here to clear some more trash. They have pulled the Inquisitor. The Imp Pack is here, so now nobody was doing a lot of damage until now, and we see the numbers shoot up. They've been holding their cooldowns for this pool. Really well done. I
mean, absolutely imperative that they get a good interrupt rotation going on. The beam is really useful here from Chompy. Something, you know, a beam and the AoE silence that we see from Vengeance Demon Hunters in these dungeons play a really big role in Mythic Plus, much more than raiding than we often allude to. I mean, that 8 seconds mass silence on those imps, absolutely crucial. Do well to finish off the pack there, and Imakachi is already low enough that they're starting to move over. Now, the entire reason that you saw this entire kite across the dungeon is for max efficiency. By the time they get here, Imakachi's about to be killed, about dead. The Enforcer spawned on the unfortunate other side of the bridge, so they wanted to make sure they get here in time and not waste too much time traveling. Free pumps on the right side of the screen working to pull a similar impact as well.
Yeah, so Free Pumps is doing this impact pull all by itself, whereas Gulch Trotters was able to turn, of course, that mini boss, and then they chained it into a patrol, and then they changed it into a second patrol, and then while Imakacha still had not died, they had an enforcer spawn over here, so they were able to grab him, bring him into the pool, keep the train going. You know, they've got a lot of momentum going into this map. They're looking really, really good right now.
Yeah, I mean, choo-choo all aboard. Free Pumps, unfortunately, the last time I looked over, I think they had 8 or 9 deaths. They've now entered the double digits in 14. Just a sloppy performance. I mean, again, coming out of them. This is their map hook. They do have a good strategy about what they're doing, clearly, but unfortunately just too many spot deaths and a few wipes along the way. Gulch Trotters moving over now with that second mini-boss. We see the eyeball boss spawn and move over. Now, this one is probably the most dangerous and the biggest pain in the butt of the 3 bosses, as he does do that channeled beam on a player. You can't actually line of sight that beam, but you have to do it before the cast goes out, before the channel starts. Otherwise, he will grab you, add 5 stacks to you that not only slow you, but decrease your damage done by 5% per stack. Certainly not something that a DPS wants on them.
Yeah, you know, ideally it will go on the healer or the tank every time. Unfortunately, it did go out on that Boomkin, and you see it's really hurt his damage quite a lot. He had to sit in bear form so that it didn't kill him, and he wasn't able to do any damage during that time. He was taking quite a lot of damage. Here comes the next disintegration. It is, of course, onto the tank this time, so they are still able to get full effective DPS onto him, while Free Pumps is just barely engaging Imakacha, a full mini-boss behind with this Watcher here on like 60% health. Really, really good.
A full 60-second difference in terms of deaths between the two teams. That's a huge mountain to climb. Not only are they behind in terms of raw percentage in the dungeon, progression in the dungeon, but then an extra 60 seconds. They really have their work cut out for them, but we're far from being finished with this dungeon. A lot of damage coming in there on techniques, managed to stay alive, well healed through it. Finishing off Balgar here. Now, this is where we're going to see, if they do decide to do it, that trick with pulling Talixae outside of this area, despawning the boss, and having access to the third Fellord without ever having to deal with the third Enforcer. Now, it's important to note here, and it's well done by them, pulling this mini-boss away from any potential Enforcer spawns. The last thing you want is that Enforcer in one of those 4 random positions spawning right on top of you, and there goes your little trick.
Yeah, we did see a couple of unfortunate Enforcer spawns earlier where a team was engaging one of these mini-bosses and the Enforcer popped up right on top of them, and then any chance they had was totally wiped away. Of course, we see another death coming out of free pumps, this time on the Windwalker. This is, you know, something that is just really sad. You know, these guys have put in so much time in the tournament. Everything is falling apart right now for them. But of course, the all-stars of this dungeon are yet to come. It is going to be Talixae Flame Wreath as well as the final boss here. They could very easily wipe the team, and then that's a huge time loss and then a very long run back.
Yeah, but everything's just looking in favor of Gulch Trotters right now. They execute very well. The rest of the trash here pulling the entire harbor up to that 3rd general that spawns. They're really harboring in the doom of 4 free pumps right now. They will get that 100%. They will finish off the 3rd general and avoid that last Enforcer. They'll have their work cut out for them with Talixae, of course. But after that, they have an even further smaller advantage that you mentioned earlier with that Demon Hunter and that Spectral Sight, being able to pinpoint that demon amongst all of the guests with that Guess Who game. So everything's looking in favor of Gulch Trotters. They're just really performing well here. Nice clean pull for them. Free pumps just now working on that 2nd mini boss.
Yeah, so now Gulch Trotters has got this guy. They are quite far away, of course, from Talixae. So they are looking to, it looks like, kite him back towards it. You know, while you're killing this guy, there's no reason why you can't be dragging this little guy around. You know, get some effective movement out while doing damage. Now, not all of these are mobile damage dealing classes. The Boomkin will be losing a little bit here from this movement, but for these melee players, it's not a problem at all. This guy isn't very scary, just a very small frontal cone, while free pumps is, you know, quite a deal behind.
I mean, net efficiency certainly is in favor of moving that mob over to Talixae. They do have 40 seconds on Bloodlust, though I do very sincerely believe that they will be saving it for Melandris, the most dangerous boss of all 3 in this dungeon. They're ready to pull Talixae here and do so immediately. Now, name of the game on this boss is that she will about every 20 seconds spawn a pack of 5 imps, similar to the ones in the trash packs that we saw. It's absolutely important that you interrupt them immediately and keep them locked down, because they do the same cast as the trash mobs that we saw earlier, doing a ton of damage to the group. Not to mention our increasing damage aura throughout the fight. That's particularly dangerous, Sours.
Yeah, it's important that we see, you know, good cooldown rotation. We saw, it looks like a Demon Hunter Metamorphosis into I-Beam on this first set of imps, as well as Windwalker popping off. Druid hasn't done very much damage yet, so perhaps he's saving damage for that next set of imps. You know, if you fall behind on those guys, it's bad. Another death from the Windwalker over on the side of free pumps. You know, it's not looking so good for them. I don't think pumps is going to be freed at this rate.
No, not at all. And the problem is they have their battle res down, and they're actually having a full wipe right now. The reason they couldn't, we weren't seeing the res come up is because once you pull one of those mini bosses from Talixae, they're considered a boss, and you cannot res when you die once a boss has been actively pulled. So full wipe coming out of free pumps there, entering the double digits right now. Gulch Trotters looking fantastic. Talixae at 57% right now, well cycling their CC and CDs on those imps as they spawn, making sure that every pack is well dealt with and dies quickly as well. Withering Soul being constantly interrupted. Don't want that max health reduction on the team, especially with this ramping AoE dot.
You know, there's a lot of people who see this and they can't believe this has happened. Gulch Trotters is the one with the full screen. These guys have been playing out of their minds so far in this dungeon. You know, Talixae on 30, just 37%. A Solar Beam coming out on these imps. Now they're not going to be scary at all. Another Blood Elf Silence to make sure that these imps stay locked down. Doing a good job keeping everything under control. Now, the damage from this boss is going to be ramping up progressively as the fight continues. And so that's why we see Dag has not done very much damage. But you see it affected in everyone's health. You know, all of a sudden, everyone's kind of low. Boom, full health. The healer is getting ready. They're on top of it. You know, he's doing a good job stabilizing everybody on like 50% mana. Really excellent healer play and really excellent gameplay all around from these guys. Yeah,
it's looking really good. I mean, the dot is starting to ramp pretty nasty. People are chunking for about 30 to 40% of their max HP. Doing really well there to bait all of those kind of fire zones together. That is where the imps spawn from, and each player is targeted with one of those, which is why you're seeing the players group up together, baiting all of those zones on the ground and then moving out of it. Talixae now at 5% HP, about to fall here, after which the team will very cleverly disguise themselves as a Nightborn and get ready to enter the main building of the Court of Stars to find the evil lurking demon.
Yeah, we are entering the dinner party now, and we saw some very fancy footwork coming out of the Gulch Trotters there, making sure to keep those imps spawning nice and close together. You know, you do want to do that. It will allow them to be killed much more efficiently by that melee cleave as opposed to spread range dotting. You know, melee cleave will be superior at the end of the day, and you know, they do have, of course, the Gore Fiends and several other tools for bringing in an imp in the event that it gets separated from the group, but by staying well coordinated and sitting together, you know, really clean fight.
We do see, unfortunately, that there's another 4 deaths on the board for Free Pump, so further difficulties on their part. Now, in order for Spectral Sight to actually work on the Havoc Demon Hunter's part here, they do need to get all 5 clues immediately. So they run around, grab all 5 clues as quickly as possible. Demon Hunter pops that Spectral Sight, sees one of the guests outlined in red, and immediately talks to them as the group runs over to the balcony that they go to, which will, spoilers chat, will be revealed as a Dreadlord in fact, and they will get ready to nuke it down immediately.
So yeah, this guy is of course not Jaina, but we saw that they have been working out. They earlier in the week we saw if you got one of these bottom enforcers, they like to take a nice leisurely stroll, but this guy has a much faster trot up to here. You know, they have been, you know, hitting that treadmill, and he is here transformed into this vile demon. You got to be careful of the Shadow Bolt volley. Now it's not really scary. You see, it does a lot of damage, and it's going to put out a debuff on the team that will make the next Shadow Bolt volley do additional damage. But as long as you're not standing at a variable distance from the boss, then you will never get a second stack. Now, if the first Shadow Bolt volley hits you when you're, say, out of the room, then that debuff application will be late, and then it won't fall off by the time the next Shadow Bolt volley comes in. So by making sure to stand in close and stay at a good range, this mob isn't scary at all.
Yeah, so nothing too scary here. Just making sure that the tank avoids that frontal Carrion Storm as well. Getting the Freedom or the Dispel on the debuff from the magic debuff, of course, from the mob, as well as it will decrease your strength by 50%. Certainly don't want that on the tank. They want to output as much damage as possible too. We'll be going down here in a moment. The key will spawn, grabbing the key, and then they'll have access to Melandris, the last boss. Now, Cyrus, this is the boss that, you know, he's the Shade of Xavius MVP of this dungeon. Really scary. Nothing too crazy at the start, but will ramp up in damage significantly as the fight goes on account of those images spawning, which increase the damage of that Slicing Maelstrom.
Free Pumps is almost done with Talixae. They did lose subs on 6% health. Hopefully, of course, the Windwalker dies following it. Everyone's getting really low. The Lock Healthstone's back up to the full. Rogue pops cheat death. He's looking very unhealthy, you know, but 1% health, they should be able to squeeze it out. But of course, 26 deaths to 2. They are 1 minute and 20 seconds behind. They are 120 seconds behind. Two full minutes, right? This is, you know, this is Gulch Trotters' game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good update to have over there on the side of Free Pumps, and knowing that they're, you know, at least succeeding with that boss, getting upstairs. But I mean, they're just so ahead at this point, Gulch Trotters. They finally start off on Melandris. Immediately that Bloodlust comes up, want to get as much front-loaded damage as they can. And now, the way the mechanics work on this boss is that he will do that kind of Blade Flurry charge at a target. You want to make, at the furthest target away from him, you want to make sure that you're piling all those images together, as you see Chompy well doing there. That way you concentrate all of the lines for the piercing gales that come out, making it very easy to dodge. We can see the players here just easily sidestepping. And you also have a concentrated area where you make sure that you never go near during the Slicing Maelstrom, because not only does the Slicing Maelstrom do a huge amount of damage on the group, but it's actually exacerbated if you're too close to an image. We can kind of see these little circles forming around them. If you're within that area, you're actually taking extra damage on top of it.
Yeah, we saw Chompy have really good positioning in the previous dungeon when they were dealing with Moroes. And again, we see just how well all of these mobs are stacked over here. As long as you know, you stand at that range for the charge, he's going to charge out at you with that Blade Surge. He's going to drop a Ghost right there, and then you can just walk away and then, you know, bide your time, and then you can walk back there. Those mobs are so well stacked, and once they get to 5, they're going to start despawning. So they're going to stay at 5. So the amount of damage that's being done by this this piercing gale on everyone isn't ever going to get scarier than it is right now. So it's up to Dag to make sure he knows how to use all of his healing abilities properly, so that he can keep his team alive. Otherwise, you know, this boss could very easily kill a member. But they do have 2 battle reses available, as well as 2 battle res classes. So, you know, Tech goes down. They may need to battle res him. You know, that's, you know, you don't want to be the guy, but
like a snake out of the grass, Techniques does come back up with that battle res, immediately rejoins the fight, and they do have 1 battle res left on the board right now. Now, I mean, we have reached that cap damage for the Slicing Maelstrom, but it's really scary. They do have some support in the form that I wouldn't be shocked to see if Dag was, of course, wearing Cephas right now, opting that the tank runs into one of the whirlwinds right before it does proc that Purgatory on the Blood DK. Techniques staying alive as well. No more casualties there, but Chompy also gets clipped by that Blade Surge charge from the boss. So things are looking a bit sour for them right now, sorry to say. But a lot of damage coming out. They do have that 1 battle to fall back on. Unfortunately, spawn one of the spirits in a not very ideal situation right now. And here comes the next Slicing Maelstrom. Everybody needs to make sure that they stay nice and healthy, using health pots if they need. And of course, there is that rotational support. you know, every other, we're going to have a rotation of either Cephas or consumption from that blood decay.
So now Free Pumps has engaged Advisor just now. Of course, they do have that full 26 deaths compared to 3. There is, you know, always that chance that something terrible happens to the Gulch Trotters, and they could, in theory, lose because they've spent a significant amount of time getting the boss down here to 21%. They do have, of course, 2 battle reses available again, but looking pretty clean. You know, as long as, you know, they can keep their cool, you know, stay calm under pressure, they should be all right on this guy.
As long as they don't get blown away by this heavy wind, it should be okay. I mean, it is totally within the realm of possibility that Gulch Trotters wipes 3 more times here, and, you know, Free Pumps does take the match, but I mean, it's going to take a lot. Even with the run back, there's a 23 death difference between the 2 teams. Advisor Merlandris now dropping into the single digits of percentage left. 9%, they're clearly stabilized. Well, long ago, they reached the cap of peak damage on that Slicing Maelstrom. They seem to stabilize after a couple of small hiccups here, and they're looking primed to really finish this series 2-1 and go over to the first ever global LAN.
Yeah.
Mr. Rob?
Let's let him finish. Let's make sure, obviously, we want to cross our...
Advisor Melandris at 1%. We have a death on
all
the board.
All right,
My name's Rich Campbell.
Okay. something, Rich Campbell. You, sir, owe me a shaved head.
I did it during the match.
Good on you, man. I always love it when you make a friendly wager and people stick to it. But this isn't about us. This is about the players. And shout out to Gulch Trotters.